they say, has all the best tunes. He also has some of the best stories. Like it or not, the rascals, scoundrels, and rogues of this world are generally more interesting characters than the good guys. In fact, as well as fiction, their names and their escapades are often better remembered than those of the heroes. To prove it, we have gathered together in this volume a remarkable array of men and women whose deeds, although never laudable, nevertheless make compelling reading. They're not all malicious, hardened criminals, of course. Some of the characters in this book are even rather lovable. You may not approve of them, but you can't help admiring them. Very well worded. I totally agree. Okay, now let's see if we can decide who we are going to talk about. Just have a quick little flick through. Okay, so we're gonna read a case from the Thieves and Villains chapter, and this story is the story of Alfie Hinds, or Hinds, Hinds. The title of the story is He Escaped to Prove His Innocence. Let's begin. Alfie Hinds was the Houdini who ran the police racket in the 1950s when he escaped 3 times from prison. He broke out each time to protest his innocence of a robbery conviction, which landed him 12 years in jail. Alfie's running battle with the police and the whole legal system began in 1953 when he was convicted of taking part in robbing London's big department store, Maples, of £30,000 in wages. Alfie, who was born in 1917, had a criminal past. He had been to approved school and Borstal, and during the Second World War had deserted from the army. But after his marriage in 1947 to Peg Stoodley, a doctor's daughter, Alfie went straight. He opened a business dealing in war surplus goods and second-hand cars and handling demolition work. Peg and Alfie had a son born in 1948 and a daughter born in 1951. Throughout his trial at the Old Bailey, Alfie protested his innocence. The police claimed he had led a gang which blew open the safe and escaped with the wage money. Alfie said he was at home with Peg when the store was robbed, but the jury didn't believe him, and the judge, Lord Goddard, sentenced Alfie to 12 years preventative detention. Alfie, describing the trial as a farce, was determined to fight back. The campaign to prove his innocence was to involve him in 31 court appearances between the time of the Maples robbery in 1953 and the final hearing in 1965. His first appeal for a fresh hearing was rejected by the courts, so Alfie decided he must get out to draw the public's attention to his case. In 1956, he was cooped up in Nottingham prison, studying law with a driving determination to use every twist and turn of the legal system in his fight for freedom. His plan was to escape to Ayr, where he believed he could convince an Irish jury of his innocence. There were 2 escape plans being hatched at Nottingham. One, a mass breakout, and another involving just one man, a smash and grab driver who was serving 8 years. harmless attempt. My problem was that if I broke prison, I was committing a crime. The golden thread which ran through all my years of imprisonment was that I must not commit one crime in order to prove that I was innocent of another. He discovered that if he escaped at the same time and by the same route as another prisoner, but provided he had not been involved in any planning, all he could be accused of was escape from lawful custody, which was not a criminal offence. Alfie knew of the one-man escape plan, but he never let on. When his fellow prisoner made his break, Alfie simply tagged along. Reunited with Peg, he moved to the Clapham area of London. He bombarded the newspapers with letters explaining the reason for his escape. He even promised to give himself up if he could get an inquiry. Despite the publicity, no new hearing was promised, so Alfie took the ferry to Ireland. Then he contacted Peg, getting her to send over some money to buy a cottage a few miles south of Dublin. But in August 1956, it all went wrong. Alfie was arrested as he went to pick up a consignment of tools from a Dublin shipping company. Back in Pentonville, Alfie spent 2 years in fruitless legal wrangles, trying to prove that he had been unlawfully brought back from Ayr, and that the Maples case should be reopened. But even as he made a succession of court appearances, a second escape plan was forming in his mind. Alfie decided to make his getaway during one of his many visits to the law courts in London. Each time he arrived, his escorts removed his handcuffs, took him for tea in the staff canteen in the basement, and then upstairs to the lavatory before his hearing started. Alfie arranged with an old friend due for release from Pentonville prison to make a key for the lavatory and leave it taped to the underside of one of the canteen tables. On the day that he planned to escape, Alfie was escorted as usual to the law courts. Down in the canteen, his trembling fingers groped beneath the table and closed around a packet. It was unexpectedly big for a key, but he managed to slip it into his pocket without arousing the suspicion of the prison officers. Warily, he undid the package in his pocket. Inside, to his surprise, was a padlock. What was it for? Tea finished. Alfie and his guards made their way up the stairs to the court and the lavatory. One glance at the door showed Alfie that the plans had changed. There, in his own words, were 2 of the biggest and brightest nickel-plated screw eyes I had ever seen. One on the door itself, and the other in the right-hand jam. I assumed my prison friend had been unable to fit the lock, and that this was his solution. Rushing ahead of his escorts, the padlock gripped firmly in his right hand. Alfie opened the door to the lavatory with his left hand. As they entered, he slammed it shut. Within a second, the padlock was in place, and Alfie was away again, down the stairs and out into the street. There, waiting to take him to London Airport, was his brother Bert and a friend, Tony Maffia. At the airport, they found they had missed the Dublin flight, so they drove to Bristol. There, as a result of a circulated description, Bert was mistakenly arrested as the escaper. Alfie, sitting quietly in the airport lounge, was picked up as a suspected accomplice. But at the police station, a prison officer arrived and identified the right man. Back went Alfie to Pentonville. In June 1958, Alfie made his final escape, this time from Chelmsford Prison in Essex. As with his first breakout, he waited until just one man was on his way over the wall and followed him. This time, the fellow escaper was Londoner Georgie Walkington, serving 7 years. assumed names, he set himself up as a car dealer in Dublin. Things went well until Alfie was caught smuggling cars across the border between Northern Ireland and Ayr. His fingerprints were sent away for identification, and the startled customs men only then discovered that their smuggler was none other than the king of escapers. He was sent to prison for 6 months in Belfast for smuggling before being returned to Britain in November 1960 to finish his 12-year sentence. In a month, Alfie was making legal history. An appeal to the House of Lords was finally under consideration. In December, he made several visits to the House Appeals Committee, and the first time that a prisoner had been permitted to argue in person before the noble peers. But again, his hopes were dashed. His application for leave to appeal to the Lords was thrown out. A few days later, Alfie was on his way to the top security prison, Parkhurst, on the Isle of Wight. Then, in 1962, he got his lucky break. Ex-Chief Superintendent Herbert Sparks, who had investigated the Maples robbery, had written a series of articles for a Sunday newspaper. One of them told how he had caught Alfie Hinds. It implied, of course, that Hinds was guilty. In January 1963, Alfie issued a writ for libel against the detective. Just over a year later, the case was heard. Alfie spent 6 days in the witness box. In his summing up, the judge, Mr. Justice Edmund Davies, asked the jury, "Has Hinds spoken with the voice of truth about the Maples robbery, or is he a plausible liar who appears to have attracted to himself, in some quarters, wholly unmerited sympathy and support?" After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found for Alfie and awarded him £1,300 in damages. The following day, Alfie heard that the Home Secretary, Henry Brooke, had ordered his immediate release. Despite his lawyer's advice, Alfie refused to stop battling to completely clear his name. He still insisted on a retrial, and in November 1965, his appeal opened at the Court of Criminal Appeal. It was to be the old disappointments all over again. His appeal was dismissed by the court, and later by the House of Lords. Alfie had won his case with the libel jury, but had been unable to get the original conviction against him removed. He went to live in semi-retirement with a peg in St. Helier on the island of Jersey, becoming a do-it-yourself property developer, buying up old properties and renovating them himself. His keen and agile brain, which had become sharpened through endless hours of battling in the courts, earned him a place in the Channel Islands